what is the purpose of storytelling for you as a writer?
I mean, I think like this kind of actually ties into what we're going to talk about later on, but I think that all storytelling broadly has kind of been this sort of innate human need to give some kind of mechanics to the idea of like free will and determinism. In the sense that, especially like if we were to assume that, say, for example, humans probably since the dawn of consciousness have been inventing some kind of stories for why we're here or what's going on. There's even I watched a video recently, I don't know if it was like a study or something, but it was based on how humans used to sleep in sort of batches of like 4 hours, and then they'd be awake for a couple and then go back to sleep for a couple more hours. During the time that they'd be awake, in the intervals between sleep, they would sit typically around a fire, if that sort of technology had been discovered by then, and discuss like stories, do like sort of the tribe politics during that time, whatever was going on, but usually it would be probably predominantly storytelling. I think that we really haven't changed at all since that first kind of time period, in the sense that all stories are free will and determinism. Even say take like, for example, Greeks, or like the Epic of Gilgamesh as an example of that. It's about a guy who wants to exhibit free will against, for the purposes of that story, death and the idea and his fear of dying. So he goes on this journey for knowledge, or in his case, to find immortality, which is, knowledge can be anything. It can be like, say, a thing or a concept or a person or whatever you need. And then it's the return from that journey. So in that sense, it raises a question, obviously, of like free will and determinism, because obviously for the purposes of the story, the character believes they are free. They're making these decisions by their own choice. Or maybe for them, it is that fight for like, I've been told to do this, but I actually want to do this. And then, that sort of kind of impetus between free will and determinism in the story kind of takes place in whenever they're on their return from the journey, is when the new self, the one with knowledge, has to encounter the old self, and there needs to be some kind of a synthesis between those two. And then that is broadly what makes up every single story ever told. It's even present in something like Jaws, say, which obviously is a movie, but whatever. It's about a guy who obviously discovers there is this shark killing people, but also the shark is just a stand-in for the real monster in that film, which is capitalism.
I don't know if that's a hot take, or I think that's genuinely...
That's just a take. I think it's like broadly, because it is also the fact that the mayor doesn't want, the tourism for the town, because it's summer, to decline, so he doesn't tell people about the shark, and he plays it down.
Of course.
And then more people continue to die.
Let's go back, Ten, a little bit, because I think you said some really important stuff there that I want to unpack. First off, you mentioned about how like we use storytelling as a way to kind of understand reality, almost. Where do you think that started from? You obviously mentioned it all the way back to the Epic of Gilgamesh and like why they did that. But when we do that, just like put myself back in those days as a human being, when we kind of like try to like understand ourselves through stories, what do you think that does for us?
Well, I think that like, we have a desperate need to feel like, I suppose, if you imagine your life as a car, that you're the one actually driving it. Which makes sense. Like, I suppose that is where the free will kind of comes into it. And people who don't believe in free will and instead say believe in determinism, which, just for the sake of clarity, is just basically, free will is not real and determinism is just like, I suppose, destiny.
Yes. The fact that we've had this conversation a million times, and we will have this conversation again.
Funny, but dream is destiny seems to be everywhere.
Dream is destiny, indeed.
But like that's just like even the phrase dream is destiny is just repackaging free will and determinism. Destiny is determinism and free will is dream. In that way, like we've always kind of sought this need. I think maybe it is just perhaps a byproduct of being conscious beings. That we need to feel that we have agency over our lives, the directions of them, the consequences of our actions, all these things.
Let's unpack that then. Sorry,
yeah,
don't interrupt. The conscious part. I think you're onto something there. I saw this kind of like this post about, I can't remember, was it Richard Dawkins or someone? He was talking to an AI, I think Claude, and he was asking the AI, "Are you conscious?"
Yeah.
And the AI kind of gave this this answer, which I think is fascinating. He basically said, "I am not conscious in the way human beings are conscious. Human beings understand consciousness from moment to moment. The fact that they can understand the past and the future and the present." But the way Claude was explaining how they think, or it thinks, is that it kind of looks at it as a map.
Yeah.
The map is already there. That is a neural network. It's already there. And when it's been directed to certain stuff, it will go different parts of the map. So the map exists already. That is consciousness. And it kind of moves in between that. And it was kind of comparing that to human beings, where we kind of go through the map on a sequential moment-to-moment basis. And that makes it, I think, that is how we reflect ourselves in stories, which I think is so fascinating, that the story has to have a beginning, in the middle, and the end. And to move through that process is how we begin to understand our reality and our kind of experience. And I think the fact that it's built like that is not, it's a feature and not a bug. It's part of how we kind of came to being. And it's part of how consciousness came for us to even to understand ourselves,
Yeah. Well, I think like when it comes to the AI side of things particularly, like that is determinism in practice. AI quite literally cannot think for itself, not in the same way that we do, at least. It has to be directed, which means that it has no free will at the outset, because we can tell it to think it has free will, but that's determinism.
How different are we?
Well, that's, I suppose, the question that we've always kind of struggled with, isn't it? Even with stories, right? Like, obviously, we want to write our own stories and things like that, but even when we are making characters who, try and exhibit free will or whatever over their lives, well, their lives are already a set path decided by us. So there was never any free will in the first place. In that way, I think, if you want to look at sort of the span of a human life as like has a beginning, a middle, and an end, just like a story, well, that's determinism at play again, because, the ending was already decided the second you got here. You're going to die one day, and that would be the end of your story.
And I think it's also kind of like a feature of like all these random events are being put into a coherent story about our mind. So all these things that kind of happen to us, happen to everybody around us. There's so many things that's happening right now on your way to even to this place right now. Around you, so many chaos, but you don't actually process it. They're all not part of your story, not part of your coherent story, So it's like, even the aspect of beginning, middle, and end is something that we conjure up because of how we kind of understand reality. To actually link that back to the story, you told me about a book, Into the Woods, and how it kind of unpacks storytelling. Could you talk to me about what you've learned from that book about storytelling?